Moving on, the impact on livelihoods. So rapid urbanization is leading to more of impact on the urban livelihoods, as I just mentioned. And so World Bank report has highlighted the intolerable limits due to heat stress between this period, 2015 to 24. So it's becoming more and more unbearable, and not everybody has the access to means to have some way of dealing with that heat. Not everybody has it. Most of the population is totally exposed to heat. And how do we reimagine our living spaces, our workspaces? I don't think there is anything you see around that is encouraging. You have new infrastructure coming up, both in the private sector. In the government, I told you we have policies on green buildings and we have policies on green spaces also. But in the private sector, everyone wants to buy a flat or a home, but they don't look at where the flat is located, what is the environment around it, is there any landscaping, greenery around it. They're just so relieved and so happy the moment they sign an agreement to actually buy a home. So more attention needs to be paid to things like this. So we really need to urgently look at where we are living in addition to where we are working. Now, what are the fallouts that we see? So again, this is something that I feel all of you would know already. So over 1 billion sea creatures died from heat wave. This is a study showing chaos on the sea floor. Of course, we have 50,000 species dying every decade. That's another matter. But we also see impact happening in the oceans. We look at the ecological consequences on the biodiversity. We are looking at heat wave effects on Indian agriculture. It's also a heat wave impact in the elections currently. It's so hot, and you expect people to step out and go and vote. We are trying to motivate through a large public campaign that you need to step out, you need to go, and you will not have to wait. We are doing color coding of polling stations where there are more than 10 polling stations in one place. So every voter is given a color sticker. So you just follow that color, and so it takes you directly to your polling station. You don't have to keep standing in the wrong queue. People actually stand in the wrong queue to board airplanes. Or sometimes in the cinema hall, you'll find them standing outside the wrong theater. So in order to overcome that, we are trying to also do color coding of polling stations so that people can quickly go in, vote, and leave that area and go back to their homes. So how do you manage, heat in the middle of the heat wave? The elections are going on, and then how does it affect your pocket? So you will find suddenly price inflation hitting you because more and more crops, like staple crops like rice, cereals, pulses, and including sugar, is getting affected by El Nino effect. And that also pinches your pocket somewhere. So what are the heat wave policy and action plans? So I looked at all the major ones. So Ahmedabad in India, in Gujarat, is one of the first ones that came out in 2014. We followed very quickly in Maharashtra. We made our heat action plans for Nagpur, Chandrapur, Gondia, Nanded, Jalgaon, Nasik, all of these cities which are badly affected by high heat. So we brought the first government resolution on a heat action plan, and we looked at, how do you do vulnerability targeting, how do you raise the funding, what are the legal foundations of what you're trying to do in terms of building codes and other regulatory framework of the corporations, and then how to bring in more transparency, involve the people, and also do capacity building. So all of these plans we looked at. And we found that in Mumbai, we have a climate action plan. So it covers all the major disasters. It's not just focused on heat. It looks at flooding. It looks at soil erosion, coastal erosion, mangrove disruption, and high rainfall, of course. But what we saw is that there is an increase in frequency of warmer years. And as you can see from this map, you can see the heat islands, and you see in the same city there's different temperature on the same day in different locations. South Bombay is much better, maybe because the breeze crosses all over that strip of land, whereas you find central Mumbai and then certain parts of the greater Mumbai suburban area exposed to high heats. And you also find that wherever there is more of green cover, the temperature is definitely lower. So this kind of mapping reveals that, what we call the land surface temperature analysis reveals that there are heat islands in Mumbai, and highlighting areas with higher temperatures due to urban features. So we already have this information. We just need to act upon it. I feel that's what is important. So what is required is a more deeper analysis to develop individual ward level strategies, addressing specific heat hazards, at-risk population within those wards, and then having a plan to deal with it, which is not happening currently. Then we looked at the Thane heat action plan. I showed you earlier in the map that Thane is today also in the high heat area. And we found that there's a frequency of extreme hot days has risen in these last years, particularly from last year to this year. And you can see how the trend is going up in this graph. And then you look at the projected trends. So also the frequency of warm nights is also increasing almost fourfolds. And then this is happening again because urban structures are absorbing heat and not able to release it even at night because the temperatures are high. And how this is going to present challenges in terms of how you deal with heat stress and how do you cool down yourself, further augmenting the heat stress. And we have made a heat action plan for Thane very recently and released it at the hands of Honorable Chief Minister, in which we've done a ward level analysis and given it to the Thane Municipal Corporation and asked them to implement the measures that have been suggested to reduce these urban heat island effects. Then, of course, no discussion is complete without talking about Nagpur. And again, I would draw your attention to the map. So you see wherever there are water bodies, like on the western side, this is a map of the city of Nagpur, not the district. This is just the city. So you have the wards and you have the zonal areas. So you see wherever there are water bodies, the impact of heat is less. And on the western side, where there is just one water body and there seems to be more of, urban infrastructure, the heat levels are very high. And you can see just at the periphery of Nagpur, heat is just waiting to come inside. It's like the heat has enveloped the entire city and just waiting to enter into the city. So which is actually very, very thought-provoking. We need to be very mindful of what is really happening. And we also have seen extreme events in Nagpur, like suddenly heavy rainfall and flooding has also happened in between all of this. So what needs to happen is more of tree cover and more of, cooling sort of activities need to be taken up to reduce this. So we found that the heat action plan of Nagpur lacked a data-driven foundation. So despite the high heat focus, it is still very broad-based. So now we are working with the Nagpur Municipal Corporation to plan more in line with what is visible already and try to make sure that in the coming year, maybe next year, this year, it's just getting done. They have better mechanisms put in place to deal with the urban heat effect. Because we have colleagues from Japan, I wanted to highlight a recent study that I have done on Japan also. And this was part of my research work that I do. And we studied the Tokyo prefectures. And we looked at the conditions in which, there's a lot of elderly population and many people live alone or they have family members who go out to work. So they are otherwise alone in the house. And we did a survey along with some students from KO University. And we looked at the challenges that people are facing. And what we found was very interesting. I was quite surprised to hear this. What is happening is that they all feel, yes, there is a plan, government is trying to do something, but they want things like reduction in the tariff. They want, food subsidy to be able to buy more drinks and have them more frequently. They want, places where they can go to cool off, Like they want to leave their home and come outside and be in a place where they can sit for a while and also engage with other community members who are similarly sort of living alone or by themselves. And we found that they were not very satisfied with the broad strategies that are available at the prefecture level, and they want more targeted approach. And this actually helped us to go for that targeted approach in Thane. This study helped us to do that targeted approach in Thane, where we are now doing ward level analysis. Okay, so basically what the elderly people and others that we interviewed told us in Tokyo, that although there are these broader healthcare strategies, they are not, they don't find immediate solutions to their problem for those hot days that they face in summer. So, sorry. So how do you tackle heat now this summer? What is it that we are doing? So we held a workshop in Jalgaon in March, and then in April in Nagpur, and then we did Mumbai also a couple of days ago. We looked at heat wave terminology, early warning systems, climate smart institutions, and we tried to find proactive measures that can address extreme heat challenges. And while doing this particular workshops in the state, we felt that there is need basically to bring more of information closer to the people. So I really appreciate what was said in the opening session, that we need to have mechanisms to deliver important forecasting and other information to the people in the language they can understand. And that's one area I would be very happy to work with SASCOM. So there's just some pictures of our conferences, the ones we held. Now, this is an interesting model I saw. This is impactlab.org, and it talks about predicting effects of rising extreme heat. It's a simulation model. I don't know how many of you have used it or are aware of it? Could I just get a show of hands? Okay. So this illustrates the potential of managing mortality outcomes by manipulating environmental variables, emphasizing the significance of understanding and optimizing parameters. So you can see these are the different parameters under the sectors of energy, transport, land, food, industry. And if you if you were to tax coal higher, or if you were to reduce the tax on oil, natural gas, bioenergy, how it immediately impacts the way you manage your heat. So how each of these parameters are important for people to be able to use the resources available with them to manage heat. So very, very interesting dashboard. And what it also says that although many areas are going to face these kind of conditions, but the local governments need to be more aware of how policy can help people improve their management of heat. So you see, this has been done in these areas, Southeast Asia. Already temperature increase projected at 1.7 degrees by 2100. And if Southeast Asia was to take some measures on these parameters, how it can reduce the impact of the heat breach that all these areas are expected to face. Similarly, Southern Europe, Southern America, and Australia. So it's basically the south of the globe that is going to be most affected, and how policies made by the government are going to impact the way people manage heat, and what can be done. So this is a very, very interesting simulation that I encourage all of you to have a look at. And so what are the key takeaways? That's my final slide. I don't want to eat into your time for tea. What is it that we felt after doing all that we've been doing since 2015? The first thing is, there is no two ways about it. There's urgent action required. There has to be a better understanding of heat risks. We need to look at leveraging nature-based solutions. Now, nature-based solution is, again, something new that has come in and being discussed more and more. Basically, it means more of tree plantation, more of green spaces to cool down the environment sustainably. And because of the high cost of land prices and the high cost of construction, how do you innovatively create those green spaces in the new construction that you're doing? And even within your home, it could be 2 BHK, 1 BHK, whatever. How do you bring in more greenery whether on your roof or within your balconies and in your rooms? And how can you also look at cool roofs and smart irrigation for enhanced heat mitigation? And of course, effective governance and public education crucial for addressing heat waves. This is something that the government needs to do. So I hope that this forum would consider forming a task force, at least for this state, because most of these key institutions are headquartered here, and you have several offices, in fact, in various parts of the state, and you will help us to make a policy draft on what needs to be brought into, within the existing regulatory framework, and in addition, making some few changes. So if you're really keen to make sure that all of the science and research that is taking place and which you are aware of and you're working on, if it has to make its way within the community, then are you willing to collaborate to bring forth a white paper? And maybe we can also pitch in for saying that there needs to be an independent department that looks at climate change, because it is, the impact is increasing day by day. Currently, it is housed within the revenue department. So it's an offshoot of the revenue department. It's called the Relief and Rehabilitation Department. So is there something that we can bring forth as evidence? Because it will have to have hard facts and financial requirements, and take it to the government post the election and make a pitch for it. So that's what I would appeal to all of you here, and those who wish to collaborate, please to get in touch. And this came in the newspaper recently, and I just thought it was very apt for the discussion today. There is no two ways about it. You have to increase the number of trees. You have to reduce carbon emission levels. You have to reduce concrete jungles, or at least make them more greener. And you have to increase the number of lakes. So much of water. Now we are talking about heat. In a few weeks, they will have tons of water falling down, and all of it washes off into the Arabian Sea. It just goes away. Is there a way we can capture what Germany is doing? They capture all the water that falls from the skies, and then they take them to big percolation tanks and put them there. So is there something new we can do, and learning from best practices across the various countries who are here today, and come up with some sort of a draft document which can be presented to the government? So I leave you there with those thoughts, and thank you once again for giving me a very patient hearing.
Thank you very much, Madam, for that fascinating and very comprehensive coverage of the
Thank you. I don't know if there are any questions.
So I just want to...
There's one hand here.
Yeah, before I give the floor for the questions, I just wanted to add to what you have described.
Yeah, sure.
WMO and WHO have recently set up a global heat health information network. We call it GIN. And through that process, WHO is actually organizing a global review of heat action plans, and to actually look at how these plans are dealing with the problem in different ways, which can actually help us to come up with a better model for heat action plans. That's probably maybe of interest to you. But the value of the heat action plans can be emphasized by the well-known fact that every single death directly due to heat wave can be prevented. So that is the value of the heat action plans that we have. I'm very happy that you are actually passionately pursuing these heat action plans despite your many duties as a bureaucrat. I think we need more champions like you to help us to deal with the problem that's so huge in the current context. So with that...
Thank you. I think that should be the opening line of whatever policy draft we can put together, that every single life from heat stress can be saved.
Thanks, Dr. Sujata, for this talk. I had just a couple of things. There are other things that I do want to talk over tea, but just in the interest of evidence-based governance and good governance, and the fact that we want to create strategies to deal with heat based on actual risks, would it be possible for the government to use one of the indicators of good governance as the making available, let's say, impact data, such as, let's say, the claims data that you provided, or let's say all-cause mortality, I mean, all-cause mortality is now being provided almost operationally by Ahmedabad city, which is making it one of the best studied cities in India for the impacts of heat, and which has enabled them to create really empirically well-founded plans, which doesn't exist elsewhere. So just a request from our side that this probably...
Certain. We'll discuss that offline. We don't have very good all-cause mortality data currently because it's not properly being registered. So we are working on those. So when we did these heat action plan workshops, we emphasized the need for collecting proper data. And so I think in a couple of years, we'll reach that level where it can be taken up for an empirical study. At the moment, if you were to use it, you'll get wrong results.
I had one small question. Your initial slides, you showed that Konkan area is going to become warmer by 2030.
Yes, I did.
So I just wanted to ask what is going to be impact on the horticulture crop, especially the mangoes in that area? Is somebody looking at that, not just the health alone?
I am personally not aware of anybody studying it. I do know of a very interesting thing though. We have things like cocoa butter and all of this. So nowadays the Alfonso crop is also being harvested a lot for mango butter. So the kernels, they are extracting the butter, and it's already a locally available product for the cosmetic industry. Definitely the unseasonal rains and the timing of the rain is impacting the quality of the crop. So you'll find suddenly some years the crop is very expensive and we are not able to export much, and then some years we get a bumper crop. Like last year was a bumper crop. So, but I'm not aware personally of any studies on this.
No, but the heat, how is the heat going to impact the crop?
Definitely. Higher the heat is better actually for the Alfonso mango. Higher the heat. It needs a lot of heat to become sweet. But unseasonal rains in the Konkan impact the quality of the crop.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a very detailed presentation. And what you have projected about Maharashtra, this one of the biggest state in the country. I'm sure my colleagues from the South Asia, I mean, nowadays the issues are, they can be almost copy-pasted in the different part of the country and different part of the world. So whatever you have pointed out related to the heat, related to the health, related to the agriculture, I'm sure my colleagues who are coming from the different parts of the South Asia, I think we can have this sort of planning in their mind. And the feedback also can come to the SASCOF forum at Pune, that how they can do. I will congratulate Maharashtra state government for the Thane heat action plan. Last 2 days, Mumbai and Thane have reported heat waves with the departure of 5.1 degrees centigrade in last 24 hours. So heat wave is really, is catching, as you have already projected in 6 years, but it's already showing up, in some of the parts of the Konkan region. It is my humble request to the state government that maybe, like you have done it in Thane, maybe if we can, work together. It's already operational in Nagpur. Professor Kotharkar is working in that.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, you must be knowing her.
Yeah, I met her.
This reminds me that the first heat action plan with IMD and government of Maharashtra, first time in the history of IMD was signed by Madam only. I just now remembered.
Yes, as Public Health Secretary.
Yeah. That was Rathod Saab was there, our DG, and Madam was there. That MOU copy is still with me. And I remember that this was signed long back.
Yes.
So the story goes behind. But I will request that we can do this type of heat action plan in some other parts of the state also,
Certainly.
where we can give the inputs also where they are required, and maybe jointly we can work together.
Yes,
That
I
will
look forward
improve.
to that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a very nice presentation.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
So thank you everyone, and thank to both of our speakers for the nice presentation. So now we'll break for tea, and since we are running slightly behind the schedule, so we reduce the tea break to 10 minutes. So we request all of you to be here again by 12 in the room. And after the tea break, we'll have some interactive session. So for that, we will regroup all of you into 3 groups. So our team will make some different setting arrangement when you come back. So please check with our volunteers about your respective places to sit. Okay. So please enjoy the tea. Thank you.
The model? Yes, I can share the model with you. Can you give me some cards? I'll share the model. I'll make. Sorry, Dr. Balkesh. I'll send you a mail. Yeah? But I'll send you from your Gmail. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That let's work on like a white paper and let's look at what are the key fire, fire brigade and all this. And we gave the government a clear draft and said, in this place, you take this place. By the government in one. Earlier, two committees sat and the report was our report got exactly because it was very practical. It was very thin also. It is 100 pages. 100 pages and we were done with it. Similarly, for any heat of blood, heavy rainfall, yes, yes. And we have all the packages. I mean, you just have to, you need people who don't give Please one. I'll give you my card, please be in touch. And I would actually request you to put together the group. Please make a group and tell me who are you. And so I welcome WMO on board, Rhymes on board, IMD. Yeah. And let's create a forum where we can exchange information by email and have online meetings. You're ready for time. Fast. If India does it, it can be done taken up by all of these countries, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Myanmar. And as we expect many states in India, and so we have to. Somebody is saying this year, so. No, we don't know when. There's a book recently. It's called The Anatomy the insurance, yes, it's very reliable. It's all digital. lot of new things are coming out in the market. Yes, we should get in touch with always very good at that. We should take that offer. It's easier for us to work with the institution. So I think Mumbai has a policy, back to one approach, and actually there's a need to set it up as a new industry. Because right now nobody wants to go in work. They all decide to post in I think this is the moment. We need to do That's why I'm again and again pitching the ideas. That's what I'm saying. Take out the financials. You need to bring up the financials and then work around it. Any
Bhutan and Nepal are to be in one group. So if you are
Kirulay? Samja jindagash chika gitire. Labdi? Kungi to kadeve malab ze chika gitire. Ngaji phatu joda. Karo tong khadara labni. Kungi to ka ni be kungi shev betire ko. Imme on bende. Lekin किस नागितिरो माम बुनी इला कुपोग लक लुसु जिगे नागितिरो मेची माता donchi tunugati kungi sosu dira finye selvi mashigare vega but tabe amchi amu muchi yar dibra debe wachi tabe na ti sheniye tuchi yente ne ko jimina mu hema be wachin di andi dauchi ginde dauchi gi ani be mun na tigi dale ichi hema ze dauchi gi ani na dego 23 te dego oh Is it something to say in it strong? Shut down bigger. Again, the change is gara remove. Like हजुर मिठीको बसको सुरु मतलब and problem थे उसे लग रहा बसको टीवी जुझे Chief presentation din apa memo tari memo ani na press release so ko ginaba na presentation कोई तो वो जब वही presentation है मतलब प्रेस agent ना तो video तरी को to be safe. Oh, wow. Oh, I think it was okay. Oh. Mhm. Okay, thank you. I Oh, okay. Okay. One is at there, yeah. Oh, oh, okay, okay. And then might be to what can video go for? Okay. Yeah, but they copy now. मेरा ऑफिस वहीं पे जी हाँ सीएस हाँ आप लोग को तो इधर नहीं लगता है ना तो वेरी and many
Okay. Sure. So, good morning again, everyone. So, we will start the session. So, may I request all of you to please take your seats. So, the presentation which we had on the impact outlook for South Asia region by UNESCAP, it will be done tomorrow. We our colleague from UNESCAP will join us tomorrow and he will do this presentation. And now we'll move to the second technical session for today, that is about National Framework for Climate Services. So for this, we'll have some presentation from our colleagues from UK Met Office and also some group exercises. So to chair this session, I'll again invite Rup Kumar sir and also our rapporteurs to please take the notes. For the rapporteurs for session is Ms. Smita Nair, Mr. Prasad Bor, and Ms. Madhuri Musale. So over to you, Rup Kumar sir.
Thank you, Manshul. So this session is about the National Framework for Climate Services that, in fact, we already got some introductory ideas about in NFCS. This is actually an interactive session, which is mainly led by our friends from Met Office. So there will be a couple of presentations before we actually get into the interactive mode. In fact, we will know exactly how the session will proceed based on the introduction to be given by our Met Office colleagues. So to start with, I invite Dr. Jain Sachin from Met Office to give us the introduction to the session, particularly to the EFCS and also the NFCS, and also try to explain how we organize the interactive components of this session. Jain, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. I hope you had a nice tea break. I'm aware that we're going to run a session for around just under 2 hours, but that we stand between you and some lunch. So we'll try to get you moving and to talking with each other. So it's not just us that will be doing the hard work. We'll be getting you in the room to do some hard work this morning as well, so that you can earn your lunch. So what we're going to do this morning is that I will give a 10-minute talk about National Frameworks for Climate Services to introduce. I'll then hand over to my colleague, Dr. Maristel Williams, who will talk about progress that's been made against the WMO guidelines for NFCSs and some initial information around interviews that's been happening with the development of national frameworks for climate services in different countries. Then we will run our first interactive session where we'll get you to think and talk with each other about where you are in your journey towards a national framework for climate services. We'll get you to think not just about what activities that you have undertaken or what activities you have planned to undertaken, but also to think about the barriers and the challenges that you're facing in the development of the National Framework for Climate Services in your countries. And then we'll also get you to think and discuss about the idea of a regional framework for climate services. Then we will give a short presentation to demonstrate an example of development along a national framework for climate services from Ireland. And then we'll have a final interactive session where we'll really get you to think forward, and we'll have a visioning exercise which gets you to imagine what a national framework for climate services would deliver. And that will take us to lunch. So I'm going to share my screen now. One moment. Can somebody just let me know if you can see the slides now?
Yeah, put them in presentation mode, please.
Are they in presentation mode now?
No.
Are they in presentation mode now?
Not yet. Or you can just maximize this slide.
Jane, have you tried sharing a specific window as opposed to the screen?
Yeah, it's showing the window. Let me just try again. Is this
Click
working?
F5, it will be shared automatically.
Is this sharing whole screen now?
Do you have, are you working with two monitors? If you're working with two
Yeah,
monitors,
try that. Does this work?
yeah, you may
Does
also
this
try
work?
to, no, you may try to share the entire screen rather than a specific window.
Yeah, maybe because I'm working with two monitors. Sorry, everybody. We always have technical problems. 1 second. I will try and is this working now? Can you see my full screen now?
No, so what we can do is probably you just maximize the slide and then we can proceed.
Yeah, I'm showing I can see the full screen from my computer, so I can't maximize it anymore.
Okay.
Let me try let me see if there's a different method. This is not showing.
No.
Hello, Jen. Please share the entire screen instead of a specific PowerPoint window. That will work, I think.
Is this working?
Yeah. Now we got it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Apologies, everybody.
No problem. No problem.
This session will be with myself and Dr. Marisol Williams from the UK Met Office, with Dr. Satyaban from IMD Pune. We'll also be supported in the room by Dr. Rupa Kumar Kohli from IITM, Dr. Pai from IMD Pune, and Dr. Anshul Agarwal from RIMES. So, climate services, this is all about providing climate information to support decision making, because we know that the climate impacts and related losses and damages and related climate risks are escalating with every increment of global warming. We know that climate resilient development requires the integration of adaptation and mitigation to advance sustainable development for all, but that this is only enabled by increased international cooperation and improved access to climate information and appropriate services. And we know that the demand for climate information and services to inform decision-making and policy-making is growing, but we know then that the information needs to be tailored to the various types of user and be actionable and usable and accessible across a range of different timescales to be useful to make decisions. And this is the concept of climate services. It's about providing climate information to help individuals and organizations make climate smart decisions. And this is the summary from the Global Framework for Climate Services. So what do we mean by climate services? When we talk about climate, we can think of three different types of information that really help people to make decisions. We can think about past and current climate observations, monitoring, and climatologies. This past information is extremely important for planning across a range of different timescales and a range of different sectors. We can also think about climate information in terms of near-term future climate. So monthly, seasonal, decadal predictions. This is why we're all here during SASCOF. It's about providing that seasonal climate outlook We know that that provides valuable information to many different sectors, particularly planning over the next few months and the next season. For example, in agriculture, in construction, in health. And we can also think about climate information in terms of long-term future climate multi-decadal projections, where we can think about infrastructure planning, adaptation strategies, investment strategies, for example. So these are different types of climate information, but what do we mean by service? This is about preparing the interpretation and the delivery of that climate information to make it of value to the user. As I discussed this morning in the opening address, the value is only realized when the climate information is in the hands of the user community to make decisions with that information. So when we think about a national framework for climate services, this is about linking climate knowledge with action on the ground. And the World Meteorological Organization describes a national framework for climate services as a national mechanism to bridge the gap between climate information developed by scientists and service providers on one hand, and the practical needs of the users on the other hand. And as I discussed this morning, the magic happens when we bring those hands together in a handshake, where we get the information providers and the information users not just handing over the information, but working together to create climate services that are fit for purpose. So what does the Global Framework for Climate Services, how do they interpret the National Framework for Climate Services approach? What is it? It's a mechanism for coordinating, facilitating, and strengthening collaboration amongst national institutions. Why do we need an NFCS? It's to improve the cooperation, the tailoring, the co-production, and the delivery and the use of climate-based, science-based climate predictions and services focused on the 5 pillars of the Global Framework for Climate Services. And these are health, agriculture, water, disaster risk management, and energy. These are the 5 focus areas, but it doesn't mean these are the only areas. These are just a first place to focus our activities. And who should be involved in the National Framework for Climate Services? The GFCSC, the National Meteorological and Hydrological Services, leading and engaging national stakeholders from these 5 GFCS pillars. And the National Framework for Climate Services should aim to coordinate institutions across the country to enable them to work together across the value cycle to design, co-design, to co-produce, communicate, deliver and use climate services for decision-making in sensitive sectors. You can see I have the diagram from the Global Framework for Climate Services here on the left-hand side. I think what's the most important part here is this user interface platform. This is where the magic happens. It sounds quite technical, this user interface platform. What is it? This is this third space. It's a place where we bring together the producers of the climate information with the users of the climate information from research, from government, from private sector, from private sectors, across services in health, disaster risk reduction, tourism, construction, transport, agriculture, and the environment. By bringing people together in these user interface platforms, we allow people to co-develop, co-deliver, and use climate information to support robust climate sensitive decision-making. These user interface platforms, these spaces where we bring the communities together, just like we are today in SASCOF and this National Services User Forum, it's about engaging, improving communication, coordination, collaboration. It's about getting to a common language so we are all on the same page in terms of what we're talking about and helping to build trust amongst the stakeholders. It's a space where we can improve climate literacy across everybody, but also improve how the producers of the science understand how the information is being used so the scientific research and development can be shaped and made fit for purpose because it understands the society's needs. So what are the benefits of a national framework for climate services? Why is it important for each country to have one? There are a range of benefits, and I'll pick out a few in this slide. They allow governments to be more aware of climate services and more willing to commit sustained funding. They allow climate services to be better tailored to the decision needs, and they provide increased interaction between the different stakeholders. They complement the national adaptation plans because they link the climate vulnerabilities and identified adaptation options with the development of products and services that help improve the understanding and address the actions, the adaptation actions. They support the robust incorporation of science-based information and prediction into decision-making and policy-making. And they also clarify the responsibilities in terms of reducing the potential for priorities slipping through the gaps or duplication or provision of contradictory information. They help institutes mandates where they might overlap and provide a framework for joint working across all ministries. So I hope this gives you a flavour of why it's important to develop a national framework for climate services, but also that this involves everybody working together to be able to provide information to support a climate resilient society. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides now, and I'm going to hand over to Maricel Williams, who will talk about developments in the guidelines for national frameworks for climate services.
All right, thank you very much, Jane. If you just bear with me, I'm going to share my screen. Can you all see my screen? Is that clear?
Yeah, go ahead.
Brilliant. All right, so thank you. Hello, everyone. Just to briefly introduce myself, I'm Maricel Williams, and I'm a climate scientist working in International Applied Sciences and Services on Jane's team at the Met Office. And apologies that we couldn't be there in person. We very much wanted to, but it's still a pleasure to present at the SASCOF virtually, and in particular to present some of the work my colleagues have been conducting towards updating the NFCS guidelines so that they are more accessible and can hopefully better support those who want to implement an NFCS in their country. So I just want to, of course, acknowledge my colleagues Nicola, Amy, and Rosanna, who are leading this project. So on the left, we have the 5 steps of the National Framework for Climate Services. The first step is to assess the baseline on climate services capacities at the national level to identify users and providers and map existing services and established capacities. The second is to organize a national consultation workshop in order to bring together all relevant stakeholders and identify gaps for the development of an action plan for NFCS implementation. The third step is to then develop a national strategic plan and a costed action plan on climate services for NFCS establishment. The fourth step is then to endorse the strategic plan and a costed action plan with timelines for NFCS implementation. And step 5 is then the launch of the NFCS. And within these steps, there is guidance for how each country would implement them. So last year, the WMO published this map highlighting the latest in terms of which countries have completed each of the NFCS steps. And as you can see, a number of countries have already started this journey. Many countries are at different stages, but it's important to note that each country has its own context. Some countries will have had more support than others on NFCS development. So we wouldn't want anyone to sort of feel discouraged when looking at others' progress, even if you're at the very early stages of this process, or perhaps just exploring the idea of implementing this in your country, this is seen as a really positive step. So the guidelines were published 5 years ago. And since then, there's been sort of huge progress in terms of countries developing their NFCS, but also in terms of the climate services landscape and the requirement for climate services across the world. So as a result, the WMO are now revisiting the guidelines and asking the sorts of questions like, Are national frameworks for climate services fit for purpose? Are the guidance steps still appropriate? Should they be revised? Based on more up-to-date case studies and evidence, what are the barriers to developing an effective NFCS? And also, what should happen at the regional scale? Is a regional framework for climate services useful for NFCS development? So to answer these questions, our colleagues at the Met Office are leading a study commissioned by the WMO and funded by CLIMSA to review progress on NFCS and update the step-by-step guidelines where appropriate. And the first thing our team did was to conduct a survey in which 52 countries have responded, where we asked about their progress made against the NFCS steps and also how they thought the guidelines themselves could be improved. So you can see that quite a few countries, according to our survey, have started step 1 and gradually fewer countries have reached the actual launch and implementation of their NFCS at step 5. But what's evident is that quite a lot of countries are undertaking this process, and this is good news because we can learn from countries that have completed the process and the challenges that they have faced as we are sort of undertaking the process ourselves. So we then followed up with some of these countries with a more detailed and in-depth interview. And we initially focused on CLIMSA focal countries, but our team also wanted to have a good geographical coverage as well as a balance of countries at different steps along the process. So one of the things that we focused on in the survey and the follow-up interviews was to sort of identify the common barriers to NFCS development. And as you can see, there was quite clear feedback on the issues of resource availability and financial support, along with some countries highlighting a lack of political buy-in or legislative barriers preventing NFCS implementation. Other countries highlighted that maintaining the NFCS after the launch was actually in practice more challenging than implementing the individual steps leading up to the launch. And so based on this feedback, our team have suggested some of the possible actions for addressing these barriers. For example, some countries have highlighted the benefit of regional knowledge sharing, and this could be in the form of, for example, WMO regional mentoring or perhaps peer support between countries. And perhaps strengthening the links between NMHSs and regional climate centers could also strengthen country engagement with international projects and perhaps allow them to tap into international funding opportunities and resources. And our team have also recommended including a new step 6 in the guidelines, which would provide guidance on maintaining and sort of evolving the NFCS after its launch. So another question that we wanted to focus on in the survey and follow-up interviews was what additional support would be useful, either within the new guidance itself or external to that. And so it's clear, according to the feedback, that case studies would play a strong role in the new guidance. And this is because respondents stated they wanted to see clear examples of other countries that have not only undertaken the steps, but have overcome similar challenges that they are currently facing. Case studies are also useful for securing senior level buy-in by providing clear examples and clear evidence of the benefits and values of NFCS implementation. And there's things in here like country peer support and regional mentoring that I've already spoken about. And the respondents also highlighted that, whilst the guidelines themselves are useful, it would be more useful that they be sort of accompanied by more practical tools like infographics, templates, or even statements or quotes that highlight the benefits and the value of NFCS that, national Met services could lift from the guidance, tailor it to their country needs, and then perhaps use this to persuade funders or governments in order to secure buy-in. So the main point here is that we've had really useful country feedback on what support they would like, and we're doing what we can to acknowledge and address that. And of course, we would welcome any additional feedback from people and the countries in this room, particularly in the upcoming interactive session. So there are particular points from the survey and interviews which we have highlighted to the WMO as key learning points and possible actions. For example, there's potentially a role for the WMO to emphasize the value and the benefits of NFCS in order for countries to secure senior level buy-in. The second is reiterating the legislative barriers, in some cases preventing NMHSs from having a mandate. And the third is needing more guidance on the user interface platform. And just to reassure people that there is fresh guidance on this coming very soon from the WMO. And lots of countries have highlighted the need for more practical tools, as I mentioned previously, so that new guidance could potentially have a whole series of example templates that could support activities across the different NFCS steps, and perhaps some clear infographics again on the benefits of an NFCS. And last but not least, we recognize that accessing finance and resources are real issues for some countries, and therefore it's not appropriate for some countries to have completed the NFCS process. And just the fact that many countries are sort of giving it thought is really positive. So again, based on our study feedback, we have put forward some recommendations for updating the guidelines. In particular, some of the descriptions of the steps have been adjusted for clarity and accessibility, and we have added 2 new steps to the guidelines, Step 0 and Step 6. So Step 0 is a planning phase, and this was recommended in response to the feedback related to capacity issues and the challenge for some countries to secure senior level buy-in. So this step is intended to be an exploration phase focused around sort of introducing stakeholders or key stakeholders to the topic to get some indication that there's support, appetite and capacity for moving this forward. And once you have secured buy-in from the key stakeholders, country focal points can then seek support for the next step, both financial support and other types of in-kind support. And Step 6 is then to review and evolve the NFCS steps after its launch. And this step would provide guidance on conducting regular evaluation of NFCS effectiveness after the launch and to evolve the framework in response to emerging climate services needs. So it's important to note here that the project is still in progress, so these updates are still subject to review and may even undergo further changes before the guidelines are finalized. So what comes next? Well, the Met Office is keen to provide support to national Met services, as is the WMO. And we want to stress in particular that an NFCS is not a one-size-fits-all. The structure will look different for each country and should be driven by the needs and the context of each country. So there might be similarities between countries, which offers opportunities for learning, but we acknowledge the different challenges each country faces. And most importantly, we recognize again and acknowledge that there are funding and capacity issues that remain a real challenge for many countries. So we're now looking at how regional support can be provided. And as we're in a regional forum, we'd be keen for any discussion on that in the next session in particular. And it would be good to explore with the participants here what would be useful for you as a country as you progress with NFCS, and whether the barriers that we've identified in our surveys, whether you align or identify with these barriers, and whether they align with your own experiences. So I will now pass you back to Jane to introduce and lead the next interactive session to explore some of these questions with you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Maricel. Now we move on to our interactive activity. Let me just share my screen again. I'll try and do a better job this time. Okay, is this working?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, right. So this activity will have around 45 minutes. And this is around looking at the status and the barriers to the development of national frameworks for climate services. This is a similar slide to the slide Maricel showed around the different WMO guideline steps around establishing a national framework for climate services. We've also added an even earlier step, which is pre-NFCS, which means that the NFCS journey has not yet begun, because we identify that everybody in the room, all the different countries, will be at a different point in their journey towards the development of a national framework for climate services. So now what I'm going to ask you to do is to get into 3 groups. You may have already been put into 3 groups, but we're going to put you into 3 groups to allow a bit more interactive discussion. You can be with colleagues from your country, or you can mix it up. That's fine. What's important here is that we get discussion between you and we can start to understand the different places you are in terms of your journey towards a national framework for climate service. We know that there's a mix of participants in the room today, both providers and users of climate services, and that is what makes this a really important session, because you're all very much part of that journey towards a national framework. So I'm going to ask a series of questions, and we'll have 10 minutes each for each question. During this 10 minutes, I'd like you to, first of all, have a think, but also then discuss and share your progress, your ideas about the different questions. After 10 minutes, I will give the next question, and then after 10 minutes again, I will give the third question. And then at the end of this session, we'll have an opportunity for each of the groups to feedback some of their summary points, so we start to understand and share the different ideas across the room. So for the first question, and we'll give you until for 10 minutes. So in 10 minutes time, I will present the next question. The first question is, where is your country on the National Framework for Climate Services journey? We want you to talk about your current NFCS progress. We want you to think about what National Framework for Climate Service activities you're currently undertaking. And if you're at the start of this journey, we want you to think about what climate services do you currently provide to stakeholders.
Excuse me, Jen.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we are trying to regroup people, and they will be led by 3 members. That's the reason. Just if you give a few minutes time, so that.
No problem.
Yeah, just 2-3 minutes. Yeah. So as we have arranged the tables and chairs for the 3 groups, and these 3 groups will be led by Dr. Anshul Agarwal and Dr. D.S. Pai and Dr. Rup Kumar Kohli. And all our NMHS representative also we would like to distribute in the 3 groups. And for this purpose, I would like to request our colleagues from Maldives and Sri Lanka to be seated in a 1 group. And colleagues from Bhutan and Nepal, they can be here in this middle group. And the colleagues from Myanmar and Bangladesh, they can be in the 3rd group. So that the questions raised by Jen can be discussed. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Sachibant. That's great.
And we have already announced the 3 rapporteurs for the 3 groups. I hope they are available to note down the points. Ms. Smita, madam, and Borji, and which other? Okay, all 3 rapporteurs are also available. Yeah.
If you let me know when you're in your groups, and then we'll give you 10 minutes to discuss this first question.
As this, the first question raised by Jen is related to the current NFCS progress. So the representative from NMHS, the participant, they can share their experience. Where is the country in this NFCS journey? And what are the NFCS activities they are currently doing? And if you are at the start of this journey, what climate services do you currently provide to stakeholders? So that each country representative can initially share their experience, followed by the other participants.
Because this whole is 1 group only. Okay, both tables is 1 group only. So our colleagues in the back, they can also come and join some of the groups if you would like. Yes, please.
You all are welcome so that you can participate in this group. Yes. It is Jen, the discussion started now. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I will give you 10 minutes and then we'll move to the next question.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Jane, can you show the NFCS steps slide?
There you go.
Dr. Jen, you may please share the question screen again, please. Yes, thank you.
There you go.
Yeah.
Please let me know if you have any additional questions or clarification required.
Yeah. Many of the participants are a bit new to this NFCS, so they just require some more time. So that.
I think a useful way to think about this in your groups is please take away the title of the National Framework for Climate Services if this is preventing the discussions, because I know that many of you will be at the early points of this journey. Think more about what are the current climate information that you provide users with, or if you're a user, how currently do you get climate information to help you with your decision making?
This session is for all the participants. It is not restricted to only NMHS participants. All the participants are attending this event. So you are kindly requested to join any group you like, and please intervene whenever you feel necessary. Please join one of the group and participate in these discussions. Yeah.
Okay, everybody, I hope you're having some interesting discussions in your groups. You can carry on talking about this question, but now I'm also going to share the next question, which you're probably already talking about as part of this first question. The second question is for you to think about the barriers that you're having to NFCS progress, or in general, what are the barriers that you're facing towards developing climate services at the national level? Have there been any challenges in the different steps of an NFCS development? Or if you're not developing a national framework yet, are there barriers in getting climate information to those who could make use of it? Are there barriers in terms of the format of that information? If you're a user, so this is where it's really important that we have both the NMHSs in the groups, but also the user community from the different sectors. if you're in a climate sensitive sector, how are you experiencing barriers to getting the climate information that could really help you? That's what I want you to think about as well. When you're thinking about that first question, what's your progress? Also think about, if you're not able to make progress, what are the barriers to making progress? Marisol showed some of those examples in her previous slides. But now please discuss for the next 10 minutes on not just your progress, but also on the challenges and barriers.
In this session, we have participants for various user sectors that I can see from energy, hydrology, agriculture. So you may please suggest how the different sectors can contribute to the success of the FCS, and what this you may feel if there is any gap between these your producers and users. Similarly, how best the services can be available to a specific sector so that NFCS can be implemented. You may please provide your comments whenever you feel comfortable. One user sector is there from energy. Disaster management. Yeah.
We will give you a few more minutes on these two questions, and then we'll present the final question. Okay, so if you can wrap up your discussions in the rooms, and I'll present the final question. The final question that I'd like you to think about is around regional coordination. We've talked about the global framework for climate services, and we've introduced the concept of the national frameworks for climate services that each country will develop. But now we want you to think about what regional coordination or regional support might help you with your national framework for climate services development. Do we need to have a South Asia regional framework for a climate service? And if we had an RFCS, what might that look like? Who might coordinate a regional framework for climate services? Could it be something like the SASCOF? I'd like you as your groups to discuss what regional coordination or support might look like and how that might help you in your NFCS journey. I just want to share a final slide to help you with your thinking. We had a member of our staff, Sarah Holmes, join the South Asia Hydromet Forum in Sri Lanka earlier this year. Some of you who are at this session may have also attended the SAF. And Sarah led a session on summarising climate services, looking at an overview of climate services, including the GFCS and the NFCS, and discussed priorities, needs and opportunities for climate services under the SAF. During this session, discussions were had around a potential regional framework for climate services and whether or not the SAF might be the forum to be able to do that, or whether that is SASCOF, or whether it's a regional body like RIMES. This just kind of sets some ideas to get you thinking about what a regional framework for climate services might look like, or at least how do you think regional coordination or peer support across the region, which we're trying to do in this session, might help you. I'll give you minutes on this question before we will ask each group to summarise back 5 minutes each. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask you all to wrap up your discussions now in the room. And then what we're going to do is ask each of the group leads to summarize the discussions that you've been having in each group. We'll take notes on these discussions if that's okay, because these are really valuable to the continued development and evolution of the WMO guidelines on NFCS and how we can better support you in your NFCS journey. I'm going to stop sharing my slides so actually I can see you in the room as well.
You may please take last 2 to 3 minutes to finalize the discussions so that Dr. Jain will ask one by one to share the summary of the discussion with respect to your group. I would like to request Dr. Roop Kumar Kohli to summarize that, that discussion of their group.
Hello. In our group, there were 2 countries, Nepal and Bhutan, and India also. For the question 1 related, Nepal has given that status of step 0, that though draft was prepared during the COVID time, however, it was not acceptable. So step 0 for Nepal. And reason was the lack of resources, as it is not in the priority of the government. And also they are providing climate services to the different sectors like agriculture, aviation, health, energy and disaster. And for the health, energy and disaster, health and energy sectors, they have done MOUs. Then one more care project was implemented by RIMES and funded by WMO, World Bank. And in that project, NMHS was passively involved, not actively. So this was for Nepal regarding question 1. And for Bhutan, again, step 0 is the answer for question 1. And however, they are providing data, prediction, climate projection for different stakeholders. They are using downscaled products, and for agriculture, some tailored products they are using. Then for all questions, shall I summarize? For question 2, barriers to the NFCS progress. For Nepal, again, lack of resources for the med services, sector-specific products like human resources, infrastructure, capacity building. These are the lack of resources. It is one of the main barrier for NFCS. And for Bhutan, location-specific forecast or specialized forecast or higher resolution is required, which is not at present. Then medium range forecast is also required, and lack of capacity of capacity for interpretation of LRF they are facing. And some of the user sectors suggestions in this group that these sectors need some specific products which are not at currently available. They want tailored products. And for last question, lack of appropriate governance, lack of coordination between, sorry, again, in barrier only, one more point has raised, lack of appropriate governance as well as lack of coordination between inter-ministries. And one more suggestion is given that need for legislative mandate. That is important. And for the last question, regional framework might be helpful for strengthening the one of the pillars of NFCS. So this is all about from our group. Thank you.
Thank you, Group 1. This is really super valuable information for us. Nepal and Bhutan, your journey mirrors many countries. So it's really interesting to hear the barriers that you're facing are seen across the world. And this just gives us extra support in terms of how the WMO and how other organizations can help better support the development of national frameworks for climate services. So now we'll hand over to Group 2.
For Myanmar, for the Myanmar, okay. Actually, for Myanmar, we have the National Monsoon Program. We hold twice per year. That time we invite the related sector, agriculture, health, disaster management, and irrigation department and water sector also. Then we disseminate our focus, seasonal focus. Then they share their knowledge and they share their lesson learned for the past season. And also we collect the feedback for the user, what is their needs and their suggestions, something like that. Then we discuss and we try to improve our focus. We have the same, the area and also Bangladesh also they have like this, product. And also we upload our seasonal focus in our official websites, and also we have the Facebook. And there also we collect their feedback, the public, like all users, they can assist our seasonal outlook for the Facebooks. For example, farmers also they use the Facebook also. Yeah, and also we disseminate the direct dissemination, like we send our focus to the department by fax, by email, by Viber. Also, we have a group for the order rated sector. This is our answer for the question 1. For the question 2, actually the challenge is that actually we need a human resources. And also we need the fund, we need a budget, and also we need to improve the coordination with the sector. We need a strong coordination, and also we need additional, we need a capacity building. Finally, we need the sectorial data because for example, if there is if we announce like a heat or something, for the flankers also, so to make the collaboration, we need data for the sector, so we can produce the impact-based. For example, if we want to produce the impact-based focus, the common, the important one is the data. Data is more the important one. For the question number 3, for the regional coordination, yes, we have the strong collaboration For example, we participated in SASCOF, and also we participated ASEAN Corps also. We participated in the SAF, Southeast Hydromet Program, and also we have the member in the base there. So we have a group to get the SAF regional project. If for example we have the cyclone case, so they produce our specific requirement product, then they say by email, or we have the WhatsApp also. So we have the BCWC also, we participate there. And also through the SAF, we share the data with the member country also. So that's all. Is there anything?
You want to add anything?
Yeah. Last question, what might be RFS look like this? Actually, RFS is very important because it helped deliver the model output data, because a global model cannot run the many, most of country, only like the RCC can help our South Asian countries. So it is very important for RFCS. And we also needed a good cooperation like the RCSS for technical support, because without technical support, our country cannot, proper guidelines cannot be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you. That's fine. Yeah, that's all from our group.
Thank you, Group 2. Really excellent feedback. Again, very helpful. It's really interesting to hear how you would value a regional framework for climate services. It's also really excellent to hear that you're using social media to communicate climate information. We have to use all different media channels to get that information to our new users. So that's really interesting to hear as well. And now for Group 3.
Hello. For Group 3, we are having 3 countries, Maldives, Sri Lanka and India. So for Maldives, they have just communicated that they yet to start this kind of service. For first question, yet to start and they have not started on the first question. They have answered like that. Similarly, for the Sri Lanka also, there are different agencies they are working. But among these different agencies, they don't have the cohesiveness or coordination. So what they felt that they need a coordination among the agencies, those who are working in the climate sector. So it will be started with the stakeholder. So that was the issue with the Sri Lanka. And third, yes, in India, we have just, our colleagues, he told me that they have just recently conducted one workshop with the stakeholder in Lavasa, just near to this Pune city. And they have identified what are the problems and of the stakeholders and what are the services we are providing. So the understanding and collaboration between the stakeholder and this implementing agencies, they have started. For second question, barriers to the National Framework Climate Services progress. For Maldives, they have just communicated regarding they need the capacity building program definitely. To start such kind of services, they need a very trained manpower, HRD, and they need some framework also to how to implement this thing, because lacking of funds, it will not able to execute the things. And most important thing they have raised here, the political willingness to prioritize this kind of services, because they have to identify whether if 1, 2, 3, this will be the first sector, we need to just need more funds to implement such kind of services. Sri Lankan colleagues, he also raised a similar kind of thing. He has just mentioned that we need a different, we have the agencies, but among that we don't have the cohesiveness. So for that we need a cohesiveness, collaboration in between. They are doing separately things. Strong coordination is required and guidelines is also required for them to implement this, overcome these barriers of this second question. And definitely vice versa, we have the coordination here. We are just implementing the things smoothly, and we need to outreach more stakeholders to identify the recent changes happening to tackle this issue. Third question is the regional coordination. Yes, this is the most important sector. Among this country, what were the lacking? What exactly the regional issues are there? We need to address those issues by preparing the documentation, sharing the documentation where we have prepared such kind of documentation to overcome the issues. And we need to conduct the workshop, training in this third segment. This was the recommendation from our Maldives group. And definitely, they require the high resolution forecast also to tackle the climate-based issues. And similarly, they need the trained manpower. It is already covered in second segment. And for Sri Lankan, they have given regarding the coordination. This still all these agencies they are working, but still need to implement these things among the working with the in one cohesive group. They need a documentation to implement these things, and definitely where they will overcome with the issues by prioritizing the first, second, and third like this. So these are the discussion points among these our three groups and three countries, and definitely we need a strong funding agency for third one also to implement the or just adopting the this kind of the regional coordination. Madam, you want to say something? Thank you.
Thank you, Group 3. Again, an excellent set of discussions and really interesting to hear your thoughts on the value of regional coordination around helping to support national frameworks for climate services, especially this idea of pooling resources and capabilities around training, around the provision of high resolution data. I think this is where we could get huge value from regional coordination to support national frameworks for climate services. Thank you for working together in your groups. This is really valuable information, and we've taken notes, and we will be feeding that back into the further development of the WMO guidelines, which we hope that you will find increasingly valuable as you begin or continue on your journey towards national frameworks for climate services. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to share an example of Ireland's national framework for climate services, and then I'm going to leave you with a thought experiment for you to undertake while you're having lunch. So first of all, I will share my slides again. Okay, so you've all been discussing where you are on the journeys towards the development of a national framework for climate services. I'm going to look at a country who have undertaken quite a lot of activity during step 1. So this is the assessing the baseline of climate services at the national level to identify users and their needs, providers and their capabilities, and map existing services. Why is it important to assess the baseline? It allows us to identify where the gaps are in terms of developing climate services provision, but it also helps us assess where progress has been made. So when we've been listening to your discussions and where you feel you've made progress, what's been really valuable is hearing that you maybe didn't think that you'd made much progress along those different steps, but actually when you talked, when you presented how you're providing climate information or how you're using climate information, it's clear that you are making excellent progress. So this is why it's really valuable to take that baseline assessment. The baseline assessment makes you think about what the capabilities and what the capacities are of the relevant institutions in the country. What I heard from your discussions is that what's really challenging is that coordination and understanding who's responsible for what in the development of a national service. The baseline assessment also assesses the country's readiness to implement a national framework for climate services. This comes when a country may have numerous competing priorities and demands, especially in terms of funding available. So that understanding of the readiness is really important. The baseline assessment also allows us to assess which actors make up the national chain for climate services. So who is responsible for the provision of which information, getting that information to the people who can use that information on the ground. And also, as I previously discussed, it allows you to see where you are already providing climate services, but also through working with the stakeholders, understand what the needs are and assess what the gaps are in terms of the climate service delivery. So I'm going to present the National Framework for Climate Service in terms of Ireland's story. This story is very close to my heart because I actually live in Northern Ireland, on the island of Ireland, and I'm also part of the board for Ireland to Met National Framework for Climate Services. So what was Ireland's route to a National Framework for Climate Services? Well, they took a project-first approach where they aimed to understand the national relevance and appetite for coordinated approach to climate services, and they aimed to establish a permanent national framework for climate services. They took this project-first approach because it was low risk. It had potentially high impact. It was able to identify the relevant stakeholders and evaluate where engagement was already happening. It allowed us to identify where there were potential problems and enabled the documented evidence then to be brought to government to help push forward a national framework and the support for a national framework for climate services. So the project has been called Translate because it aims to translate literally huge volumes of climate data into usable, actionable information. It's all about translating that climate information into something that can be useful and accessible. There were two aims around the Translate programme. First of all, to develop standardised national climate projections for Ireland, and secondly, to develop climate services to meet Irish adaptation sector's climate information requirements. So this is a timeline of the National Framework for Climate Services development in Ireland. You can see that in 2019, Ireland established its National Adaptation Framework. In 2020, there was a research call to build national capability around the provision of climate projections. In 2021, Translate was established. So this is the initiation of the National Framework for Climate Services, and an engagement workshop with the different affected sectors was held in July 2021. The National Framework for Climate Services proposal paper was presented to the Irish government in 2022 and was mandated by the government in 2020. And in 2023, the first National Framework for Climate Services meeting was held. And in February of this year, the first annual NFCS workshop was held with providers and users, and the website was launched, and they've just launched the start of Translate 2, which is the next stage of the National Framework for Climate Service development. And what's really exciting is climate information is now already being used to make changes in regulations, for example, in the transport sector. So here we have the timeline again. So we had the Climate Adaptation Framework in 2019, where there were mandated sectoral adaptation plans and mandated local authority climate action plans. So this is where we think about not just the National Framework for Climate Services, but the subnational Framework for Climate Services, because action is often undertaken at those local levels. It was identified that there was a lot of fragmentation of climate services being provided. There was a lot of ad hoc provision of climate data and information on project by project. It wasn't clear what data was being provided. It wasn't clear who the information was being provided to, and the communication across different providers and different users was poor. These were the barriers to a national framework, a holistic framework around the provision of climate services. And this is where the Climate Change Advisory Council advised that a national framework required standardised climate projections for Ireland, and led to the research call for Translate, which is the seed for the National Framework for Climate Services. So I hope that gives you a flavour of a country's journey towards a national framework for climate services. Okay, so I know that I am eating into your lunch, not literally, I hope. So instead of running the final visioning session within this group, what I'm going to leave you with is a thought experiment for you to think about either on your own or with your country colleagues about thinking what a national framework for climate services might look like in your country. So I'm just going to share a final slide. So the activity that we were going to run was around a visioning for climate services. So we know that the aims so I'll just go to the next slide. We know that the aim of a national framework is to coordinate institutions, enable them to work together, to co-design, co-produce, and communicate and deliver and use climate services for decision-making in climate-sensitive socioeconomic sectors. But what I want you to have a think about is your vision, your national vision for a climate service. So what I want you to think about here is what you've gone for these aims, but now you're maybe 5-10 years ahead. I want you to look into your crystal ball. How can you imagine how a national framework for climate service has changed things in your country? What difference has it made? How are people interacting? There's no wrong or right answer here. This is about letting your minds explore possibilities. If you have a really clear vision for what your NFCS looks like, it may help you to identify what steps you need to take to reach that vision. So what I want you to do is think about what your vision is for your country's national framework for climate services. Where could you be in 5 or 10 years if you put this in place? And I will leave you at that point. And thank you for being incredibly supportive of this session. We really hope to have been with you in person and to lead the interactions in person. But colleagues in the room, Dr. Sajaban and colleagues have been really excellent in being able to help us run this hybrid session. So thank you all for participating so well. It's incredibly valuable to us.
Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Yes,
Dr.
Soma.
Jan, this is Soma Pupalza, Head of Research Division from Afghanistan Meteorological Department. We want to know that about National Framework Climate Service guideline, if you have any focal point from Afghanistan too.
Would you like to share the focal point? That would be really interesting.
Yes, I will share our focal point later. Please send me your email because we are, I think, we doesn't have any focal point to work NFCS with WMO. And because of that, we want to share you with focal point and create our NFCS.
Yes, that's excellent. So we continue to conduct interviews around the guidelines and your journey along the National Framework for Climate Services steps. So we'd be really delighted to be able to speak to you about that. So I will share my details.
We worked with Katrina for data gaps, but doesn't know the NFCS that what's its guideline and anything else. Because of that, we want to share our focal point and also know about it more.
Excellent. Thank you. That would be excellent. Yeah, we work with Katrina very closely. She's in my team.
Okay.
Jen, how do you think the vision session should proceed?
So we're not going to run the, and I know that we're behind time, so we're not going to run the session now. We're going to end the session now. Okay. And allow the countries to think about that over lunch. It's not something that we need to necessarily share. It's more, as countries, you may want to discuss together about what your vision is. That might help you to think about what your national framework might look like. I hope that's helpful.
That's great. That's Yeah, we'll compile
So
the
I think
vision inputs that we get and then pass on to you for further analysis.
fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jane, for that very interesting session. And I know it's really very hard to conduct this type of session interactively in a hybrid mode, but I think you managed to do it. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you to you. I hope I can be there in person next time.
Thank you, Jan and Mariel, for conducting the session online. And thank you to Rup Kumar sir also for chairing the session. And all our participants to very actively join the session. And thanks to all our repeaters also for this session, for taking the notes and providing the feedback. So now we'll break for lunch and we'll meet here again at 2:30 for our next technical session.
Sorry.